This is the Improv Chronicle podcast. I'm Lloydie. It's Tuesday, 9th March 2021. And as the vaccine rollouts happen across the world, announcements are beginning to be made about when theatres might be able to open later in the year. Some people are responding with excitement and booking shows, but others have had time to reflect during the pandemic, and some have thought about leaving improv behind. Some of today's guests thought about it for a while before deciding if improv had a future in their lives or not. Others are still deciding. All of them have been incredibly honest. Before we go on with today's episode, a content warning. As we go through these candid interviews, some guests talk about grief and one talks about suicidal thoughts. Please choose to listen to something else if you feel the content of this episode might not be for you right now. And if you are struggling at the moment or are in any way impacted from what you hear in today's episode, there are links to some useful resources in the show notes. This episode started on a walk. The only thing we're allowed to do with another human being in the UK outside our homes at the moment is exercise. So I've been increasing my step count with different friends on different walks. Like the audio nerd I am, I always have a mic handy, so when one of my friends said he'd thought about quitting improv, I asked if we could have a chat for the podcast.
Hi, I'm Brendan Duffy. I'm an improviser from Nottingham, and I'm 1/5 of Denise's 50th.
And it's true to say that you're wondering whether you want to go back to improv or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's been such a long time now. I think it's 12 months since I last performed on stage, and during this time I've just thought whether or not I will make a return.
And you've not taken part in any online improv at all?
No, for me, the whole online thing didn't really resonate. It didn't give me what I love about improv. So I didn't fancy going for it.
So what did improv give you pre-pandemic?
I guess a real confidence booster. It gave me an outlet to vent sort of anything really and spend time with friends and people I care about.
And you're thinking of giving that up?
Totally unsure at the minute. I think it's something I really have to consider what I want from improv moving forward. I've replaced certain elements of what I got out of improv with other things. So I've started a podcast, I've been running, and I'm just unsure of what I need to get from it, once we go back to normal life.
So for you, it's been such a long gap, best part of a year, and you're now kind of getting fulfillment elsewhere. Is there anything that entices you? Anything that is making you think, well, maybe?
Well, I would class myself as a confidence performer, so I think it depends. Like, once I get the confidence back and get on that stage, there's nothing quite like the feeling of being on stage and engaging with an audience and giving them something. And I think that's the one thing that I can't replace with the other activities that I've taken on.
Would you say it's given you a new perspective on improv, though?
Absolutely. I think moving forward, I'm definitely not going to be doing things that I don't necessarily want to do and that don't interest me. I need to be doing it firstly for me, and then the rest comes with it. Do I want to dedicate 3-4 nights of the week to improv if I'm not getting what I want to get out of it?
I really hope Brendan does improvise again. It seems like it's not a given at the moment, but I'm hopeful he will, because quite selfishly, I love watching him on stage. After talking to Brendan, I put out a call for improvisers who'd been thinking of quitting, and I had more messages than I thought I was going to. I had a message from Seoul in Korea from someone I've spoken to before on this podcast, and it surprised me because this person was one of the most enthusiastic evangelists for our art form that I've ever spoken to.
Hi everyone, I'm Helena Jang from Seoul, South Korea. And I've been doing improv for 10 years, and I'm teacher, instructor, and performer for the improv and I found the improv school in Korea.
You said to me that during the pandemic, you had thought about not going back to improv when things returned to normal. Why is that?
I was a full-time improviser during 6 years, and my main income was the business workshop through improv, like team building, leadership, and communication with the improv for the big IT companies. And that was my income, main income. I had also personal classes and also general classes for the adults and kids, but that was very small income. And because of the COVID-19, I couldn't make any business workshop and I had to make money. So I did a part-time job like teaching facilitation skills and online classes, but not improv. At that time, I was seriously thought, do I have to keep doing improv or do I have to get different job?
And were there certain like experiences or emotions or feelings that you didn't get that you want back?
It was terrible. It was awful. I almost thought about maybe it's too much, but I will say because it's true. I thought about suicide because that was so awful. I was so desperate and frustrated because I wanted to do improv and I wanted to go back to improv, but I couldn't. And I did another job what I didn't want. And also without improv, I felt like it's like dead inside because improv was very important and it was my everything.
You were quite clearly in a very difficult place. You are now talking to me months after this. How have you been able to turn that around?
Actually, um, I made the money last year, so I'm little bit stable right now. And also, I started the online improv and also online improv classes, and I could make a little money. That's also one reason, and also the biggest reason is actually my husband supporting me a lot. So my husband is making money right now. Because of that, I can focus on this improv.
Helena's honesty was incredible. We spoke about what I'd include from her conversation, and she hoped that by talking honestly about how she'd felt, that others might not feel quite as alone. Another message I got for this podcast was from a UK based improviser who, once again, was a huge advocate for improv. So I was shocked when he said he'd thought about quitting.
Hi, I'm Hugh. I'm an improviser with Stealing the Show, the improvised heist comedy, with Mates Improv, the improvised sitcom, and now with Space Base Mars, the improvised sitcom podcast from the surface of Mars. I'm having to piece together the timeline, but I think about lockdown 2, I realized, I don't miss it, which was a shock, an absolute shock. I was relieved. I was relieved not to have to go back to improv, and I pieced that together from Stealing the Show. We just started planning for our summer of festivals. We had a huge amount with that. Mates Improv was all kicking off again. Festivals, Edinburgh, Brighton, and just a huge amount of planning for the rest of my year. And all of a sudden, rather than saying, "Oh, I'm going to miss out on all of this," my body was telling me, "You don't have to worry about any of this anymore," and that was really nice. And I think the problem, the inherent problem there, wasn't that that I didn't like improv or I didn't enjoy being a part of these things. It was that my relationship to improv before that point wasn't at a healthy, balanced level. And so all of a sudden it went away. It forced me to reassess the relationship. And all of a sudden I have more time with my partner. I'm being a better person to live with. I'm being better about chores and things. And generally I'm more relaxed. And I was having I was having a nice time, and like don't get me wrong, I'm incredibly lucky as things go in terms of how the pandemic has had an effect on my life. I'm super lucky, and I will count those blessings every day. But yeah, there was a moment where I was like, oh, this something's clearly wrong here, and maybe the wrong thing is improv, and maybe maybe the answer is no more improv. And I sat with that for quite a long time. I think through lockdown 2, I was thinking about, I think it was lockdown 2, I was thinking about what else I could do with my time. I was starting to think about how I could come out of it and do other things. I picked up my guitar again. I booked some singing lessons. I was thinking about, I don't want to say sketch. I think sketch and stand up very briefly crossed my mind, but I don't think they're just not for me. The other thing that compounded it was the idea of going to doing improv on Zoom. Just seemed, for me at least, just I could not stand the idea of trying to do improv over Zoom. As an improviser, for me, it's all about a connection with the audience, and it's such a fundamental part of the experience for me, is the fact that it's an audience connection. And so, as being a performer, the idea of trying to get that connection through Zoom just seemed so prohibitive that and then on top of that, if I can't imagine, I'm a person who likes improv, and the idea of going and watching a show on Zoom after having had a day of Zoom meetings, oh, and I don't want to put down people who are obviously championing the form over live shows through the internet at the moment. By all accounts, it sounds like people are really achieving great things with it, but it just doesn't appeal to me at all. And so when that felt like at the time my only option for getting back into it, it felt like the doors were closed to me. I haven't really spoken about this out loud, really. There was a point at which I had a chat with some of the improvisers from Stealing the Show and sort of said, how's everyone doing without improv? And a few people were like, I'm glad for the break. I'm glad to have the time off. And I was like, yeah, me too. And I think obviously that speaks to the relationship we had with like the build up to festivals and things. But other than that, I haven't really said out loud to anyone that I was thinking of stopping, and I didn't necessarily feel alone. But there were moments where I was like, just seeing, like, we've all got to pivot to Zoom shows. And I was thinking, do we though? Is anyone else thinking that maybe we just not for a little bit or at all? Whew.
And how do you feel about saying it out loud now?
I'm a little concerned, actually. I really hope that other people hear the fact that I've thought about it and go, whew, okay, right, other people are thinking about it too.
The final person I spoke to for this episode is a name that has been synonymous with improv for decades. Literally one of the world's most recognisable improv names. Responded to my open call for contributors to say, yes, she'd considered not coming back to the stage.
My name is Susan Messing, and I guess that I am a comedy doula. Is that a good way to do it? I guess you'd have to tell me what I am to you, and then I guess I would know what I am.
At this point in the conversation, we have a back and forth telling each other that we think each other is a good person. I'm going to spare you that. Susan did, however, want to make it clear that she's discovering how she feels about all this. This isn't her thesis. She's not sure of her shit, but she's talking it through in conversation. So I asked Susan, where was she at when she started questioning if she'd stay improvising after the pandemic?
I don't know if it's a sudden thing. I think certainly it's an international pandemic, and I would hope that would be a fine time for people to question everything that they're doing in their lives, right? Uh, but um, one thing that's kind of interesting that I had read was that people in a lifetime go through 5+ careers or something like that, 5+ vocations, and that it's not an anomaly to do that. And I've only had one career in my life, and being an improviser is an anomaly. To say that that's what my life is being an improviser, that's still usually kind of a side thing that people do. So the fact that that's what I do for a living is already weird. And that there's so many other applications for improv, that it doesn't have to be the be all and the end all. But during this time, I have been grieving a very complicated grief, as I shared with you earlier, that was not recorded, for my husband's death. He died April 8th of last year, 2020, and it's coming up to a year. And while I was going through that, it makes you certainly question everything you've ever done and anything that you will do, where you have to quietly say to yourself, what do I want? Which has never been my life. It's always, I've never wanted to be kicked off stage. So you set the bar real low, right? um, and I did. I set the bar super low and literally took my career in the way that maybe an improviser would declare a scene, which is, I can't wait to discover what we discover along the way. And that's kind of the way I was lucky enough to go through my life, is to say, oh, this led to me watching your shit, which led me to teaching this shit, led to me directing, or whatever the hell it is that day, or being brave enough to go out on my own, because that feels weird. Because I come from sort of a cult environment where going off and doing your own thing was weird. But, as time has changed and this world has changed, and then all of a sudden you get an international pandemic, and then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but people who have felt very marginalized in improv and in the world finally feel brave enough to speak up, because everything is already burnt to the ground anyway. I mean, Chicago was the epicenter for this stuff, and it's burnt to the ground. So if you can come from anywhere and run improv, because it's all on a Zoom format, you're saying, so why do I have to be here? And what do I need to do? I'm taking care of my daughter. That's my primary focus always. I am teaching. I didn't jump on board like my friend Rachel Mason, who just went boom last March and went on. I was still taking care of my husband, who was dying. So I kind of slowly put my feet back in the game in terms of Zoom classes and this and that. I'll teach a couple classes in China. Here's one in Singapore. Here's one in England. Here's one, in Denver. But because I don't have to be here, and because I don't have to do what I'm doing, it simply made me question it. I still love improv. I think we're all going to be so grateful when we can actually touch each other, right? That's going to be like this crazy thing. And that's without a mask. I mean, I've hugged my daughter and my friend Christopher and Bob since my husband's died. I've hugged 3 people. My mom is coming to visit March 23rd, and I haven't seen her since November of 19. She couldn't help me when my husband died. Do you know what I mean? Like, these are the kind of basic elements that are in systems that were normally in place that no longer exist. So when it no longer exists, you can look at a destroyed landscape and say, oh my God, what the fuck do we do now? Or you can see it as, when the forest burns down, then you've put some nice ash into the ground, and now the new trees have more space. And so I look at it as not a frightening possibility of that the status quo is gone. I see it as an opportunity for all of us to evolve.
I have kind of one question after hearing all of that,
Yeah.
and that is, are you going to get back on a stage?
Oh, I think I will. But I like, for example, like I've told you, the idea of one person shows has never been, or me first person as myself has never been interesting to me. In which case it should not be interesting to anybody else as well. As a matter of fact, me being on stage as myself is disturbing to me oftentimes. Like if you watch me ever do an intro to my show, those are the most wildly uncomfortable moments. I can't wait to just kind of jump into the worlds. Um, but I am working for the next 2 years or whatever, primarily on figuring out some uncomfortable truths and sharing them in order to save people some time. That's at the very least. So I know my writing is coming up, and it's a solitary thing. So during a solitary time, what a great use of your time. But yes, I will be on stage, and I will also improvise.
That was news I was glad to hear. Now, don't get me wrong. Again, it's purely selfish because I love watching Susan on stage. But Susan genuinely believes in time away.
When I say things like, you know what, take some time off, I guarantee you when you come back, you'll just naturally be better. You will naturally be better. Remember how much time you put 100% into your improv and you felt like you were tied up in knots, only to come back later on and discover, why is this easy now? It's because you relaxed your crack and enjoyed the ride instead of worried about fucking it up. So I guess I will stay in this community to hopefully be a voice of reason, to say maybe not take it so seriously, to remind yourself that you started this because it was joyful. And maybe I'm saying this to you right now to remind myself of that as well, which is getting me a little teary.
Next time on the Improv Chronicle podcast. As we continue talking about the move towards getting back to improv in real life, what will happen to online improv? To begin with, it was a stopgap for most, but 1 year in, it's fostered an international community that isn't going to go away. The Improv Chronicle podcast is produced and hosted by me, Lloydie James Lloyd. Subscribe and rate this podcast on your favourite podcast app. It makes a huge difference. And find out about previous episodes, including transcripts, at our website, improvchronicle.com.